In the Blu-ray special features The Greatness of Gatsby, we get to go through the journey of Baz doing his intense research. What kind of research did you do for this film?
Well, we work very much hand in hand, being both partners in life and partners in work. So, very much we're directed by Baz's um, frenzied research, and he will always expect us to know the book back to front, understand the period and its context, understand the author, and then also research all the specific areas of interest for my departments, which is anything from researching the clothes of the period to understanding what the advertising of the period looked like for billboards, to understanding what Times Square was like, what the interior of the Plaza Hotel was like, what a matchbook might have looked like, what a taxi number plate, and many, many other things. Drinks of the period, what a highball was, what a gin ricky was, what prohibition was, how that would have impacted on, styles of drinks served at any given function. So many, many things.
And then you helped design the Fitzgerald Suite where we're doing this interview right now. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yes, so of course in The Great Gatsby, the penultimate scene, the scene where Tom and Gatsby come to blows over Daisy, happens in a suite at the Plaza. Now, the original suites at the Plaza, or the 1920 suites, there was a big renovation in 1923, and the suites ended up looking not unlike the suites look today. And when it came to designing the set for the film, Baz felt that this was too bright and airy and light in tone. So we went to look at the Oak Room, which is another one of Fitzgerald's watering holes, which is an iconic room here, bar and restaurant here at the Plaza. And we took the dark wood panelling and put it into our suite. The suite is the same floor plan as the suite in the 1920s, but it's been wood panelled with heavy red drapes and a heavy red upholstery and carpeting. So when the Plaza came to me and said, would I be interested in designing a Gatsby / Fitzgerald themed suite, I said, well, recreating the set that we made where people are, having a huge fight is probably not the best romantic getaway room that you could hope for. And then to recreate the 1923 suite where Zelda and Scott may have stayed would be too similar to what exists today. So I think what this ended up being was my fantasy or my musings on the room that I can imagine Zelda and F. Scott Fitzgerald holed up in, him writing in his writer's nook, she lying on the bed reading a book, ordering room service gin rickeys or making them themselves with bathtub gin. And this is my vision of a sort of a jazz age writer's hideaway.
Lovely. In the film, I loved that as soon as a character came on the screen, you could tell so much about who they were just by how they dressed. Could you tell us a little bit how you came to figure out the color palettes for Daisy and for Jordan and for the different characters so that you can kind of convey their personality just in their clothes and costuming?
So clothes were very important to F. Scott Fitzgerald. He describes in a very detailed way what, for instance, almost every one of Gatsby's outfits, because to him clothes really gave you a window into what part of society you belong to. It reinforced your position in society, and he was obsessed with sort of being just like Nick Carraway inside
Within.
but out, within and without,
Yeah.
because he was from a good family, but with not much money. He was an Ivy Leaguer, but he never graduated. So he always felt that he was part of the establishment, but never really part of it. And so I think I came at it from that perspective, that in Fitzgerald's eyes, what people wore was very important and should describe who they were. And another journalist earlier this morning said to me, made a very interesting remark that I'd never thought of before, but she said, oh, it's like Daisy is continually dressed as a bride. She's always in these white outfits. And I said, oh, it's very interesting you make that observation, because subconsciously that's probably what I was going for. Because to her, the greatest day of her life, the fulfillment of her destiny, was her wedding day. And it never got better than that day, where she actually, I was talking to a friend about, this is a completely different thing, a little weird, but I've been talking to a lot of South Americans recently, and they were talking about the Incas and how, the human sacrifices were happy to be sacrificed. Well, I think in a way, she goes to sort of, the sacrificial altar. She gets married. She has so much acclaim for this, such a prestigious marriage, that she's always in her clothes trying to get back to that special day in her life. She's hoping for that day because she never gets to fulfill her potential. With all the other characters, you obviously in Myrtle have this much more gaudy expression. She's living out her fantasy of what a starlet is. She's Theda Bara. She's, a 20s vamp with, a bow mouth and a red dress. You have, Nick, who's sort of our geek chic. So he comes from a good family, comes from the Midwest. His clothes are a little old-fashioned because he's been to the war, and he probably hasn't replaced all his clothes. And you see the sophistication of his wardrobe through his contact with Gatsby. And then at the end, he's a Gatsbyophile in terms of his clothing. And as far as the palette goes, it was very much about a research into the period. People that could afford to have a large number of clothes, rich people, would seasonally mark the change very strongly. So they would go from dark colours to pale colours. People that had less money would have to rework whatever wardrobe they had trans-seasonally to get to the next season. But one of the things that you see, to have a cream suit in 1920, when cleaning things was much more labour intensive, that's a big statement about how much money you have and who you are. And you're also pretty flashy, I dare say. The pink suit is in the book. That's meant to describe, Gatsby's flamboyance, the slight, that although he's very rich, he has a level of dandyism and taste that the establishment, like Tom Buchanan, don't feel comfortable with. So I think, to round it all off, all the cues were taken from the book, in the sense that Fitzgerald cared about what people wore, and he felt it described how they fitted into that very rigid 1920s American society, and that's what we tried to do.
Thank you. That was
You're very
perfect.
welcome.